Hello, everyone, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. My name is Kendi Hilliard, and I'm currently a student athlete playing NCAA Division I volleyball. Let's talk about reflection. As an aspiring athletic director, I believe reflection is one of the most important skills a person can have. As my chapter of being a student athlete closes, I reflect on my experience at the NCAA's Student Athlete Leadership Training, or SALT as we would call it. At SALT, I was able to uncover my core values as well as understand and develop my own leadership philosophy. I also brought some of what I learned back to my administration and my school's SAC. The activities assisted me as SAC president and as a current upperclassman in helping those around me realize that they could be and are leaders in their own right. What I've learned so far is that reflecting on the good and the bad experiences in your career help create a more dynamic leader in organization. Thank you for listening and enjoy the podcast.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Dr. Don Bruce. Dr. Bruce is the economics professor at University of Tennessee. He's also the director of the Boyd Center for Business and Economic Research. He's a faculty athletic representative. He's a president-elect of the 1A FAR Association. And also with that position, he's also on the Division I Council. Greetings, Dr. Bruce. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Ty. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir. Now, there's a lot of responsibilities I just named, right? So you're doing a lot of things. In higher education, just over 20 years, around 23. So I think that you have a wealth of experience. The FAR position is one with a whole lot of responsibility because you guys can, from my experience, what I've seen, you guys can nix something that athletics may want to do because it's not in the best interest of the student athletes. I don't know if that's across the board, but from what I've seen, that's a very influential position.
It is. It's really an honor for me to have served as the Tennessee faculty athletics representative for 10 years now. And I have come to experience that, yes, we do have a particularly loud voice when we have a well-informed and passionate position on something that we hold dear, especially when we are working in conjunction with the student athletes that are the real reason we come to work every day. So yes, it's been a particularly useful time, I think, for faculty athletics representatives, and I'm just proud to be at the table for a lot of those conversations.
Right, which is excellent. So I wanted to have you on because I wanted to kind of get the 1A FAR Association's perspective on student athletes and kind of where we are today and those type things. But before we do that, I want to get your personal perspective being an economics professor. The perspective of college athletes being this, nonprofit versus nonprofit, and any money we make, we got to reinvest so we can beat the next nonprofit. And if they're building big facilities, well, we got to make sure we build facility. They hire a coach, or we got to give money to our student athletes. So we got to provide the best possible experience for our student athletes. But you also have this winning and losing thing, which other nonprofits don't necessarily have to deal with. So really your perspective in terms of economics.
Yeah, so I appreciate you asking that question. It's something I think a lot about. And even going back to my first experiences as FAR, when I went to the first Lead One used to be the Division I ADs, and they would meet with us in Dallas every year. I think you were there for a lot of those meetings over the years.
Appreciate you remembering that.
Yeah, of course. One of the first speakers I had the pleasure of hearing at those meetings was an economist named Charles Clotfelter at Duke University. And the topic was the economics of college sports. And the question really was, why are we doing this? And it was really philosophy and business all wrapped up in one conversation. And it has resonated really to this day. To be sure, we are nonprofit institutions, and many of us are public nonprofit institutions, and that we are state universities and colleges. That doesn't mean we don't pursue excellence across the board. So every nonprofit that I know wants to maximize profits. The difference, though, is that nobody owns those profits. Those belong to the organization. So if the executives are fired or they decide to dissolve, they don't actually have a right to the profits that have accumulated. That's the technical overview of this. So
Right.
it's not unusual for nonprofits to be in competition. Most American hospitals are nonprofits, and they compete vigorously for patients in the medical space. So universities compete vigorously for faculty, for students, and certainly on the athletics playing fields all across the country. Why do we do this is a really important economics question. We do it because we like to win things first and foremost. I mean, human beings are inherently, at least in some level, competitive and want to be the best because that brings notoriety, it brings recognition of the brand, and it brings student enrollment and alumni support. And those are really important economic issues when we think about the revenue sources for a university more broadly. We are in the business of developing human capital, very broadly defined. We bring people in to our ranks, and I'm not just talking about students, I'm talking about faculty themselves, I'm talking about the community at large. We bring folks onto our campuses, whether that be in person or virtually, and we hope to send them back to their lives with something they didn't have before, some kind of training, some kind of education or experience that enriches society at large. And that that's the core enterprise of an institution of higher education. And our revenue sources for that are things as simple as tuition that the students might pay, or that states might appropriate dollars from general fund revenues to come to a public institution like Tennessee. And then we cannot overlook the importance of alumni support and donor support more broadly. How do you maximize your revenues in the pursuit of maximizing excellence? You create a great brand and you support it. And when your alumni and your legislators and your students who are on campus still before they graduate are proud of the place they go to school, those revenues are flowing in and allow us to do the things that we know we need to do to provide an excellent product. So athletics is just a piece of the bigger puzzle. It's a really important piece. It's been described as the front porch of the university. I think of it as it's permeating the entire structure in lots of different ways. So you ask an economist for an answer to a simple question, you get a long and rambling answer. So my apologies for that, but it's really much bigger than athletics, and I think that's important to keep in mind as we really navigate these uncharted waters that we're in right now with the transitions that are undergoing college athletics right now.
Yeah, I find that interesting from the econ perspective, because you talk about, you hear over the years complaints about salaries and money, and really money, right, is the biggest complaint. But you think about the nature of econ at the simplest form, supply and demand, right? If somebody is good at what they do and there's only that person, they probably can command a high salary in order to, somebody could to hire them to do what they do well. And it's just an interesting concept on how it has played out over the last, I guess, 25 to 30 years.
Yeah, there are two pieces to that issue that I've continually gotten into, involved conversations with my colleagues about.
Involved, huh?
Yeah, I try to be generous here. The supply and demand issue is very real. There's a very small marketplace for elite college coaches, elite coaches in general, just like there's a small market for elite faculty members. There's intense competition and a lot of importance placed on that hire. This person comes in and goes well beyond the playing field in terms of coaching or the courts or pools or wherever. They are also an ambassador for the entire university. They're a frontline marketing representative. They are the caretakers of the brand in so many ways. They're asked to do lots of things. So the first piece is, it is simple supply and demand. Intense demand, very limited supply. What we need to do, and I think we've redoubled our efforts here, is to continue to fill the supply chain and develop people at all ranks to create broader supply for those positions. The other piece of it, though, and this comes from a position of privilege, I'm a faculty member at the University of Tennessee, and I've worked hard to get to the place where I have tenure. I am protected. I can still get fired. Don't get me wrong. I can say the wrong thing on this podcast and probably make somebody upset. But I'm protected. I have a basic level of protection. that the most highly paid members of our university staff do not have. Our coaches, our athletics directors, our athletic staff members do not have that protection. And that is not lost on me when I go into an intense conversation in a meeting room and I'm the only person in the room who can really speak freely. And it's tough. And I asked my faculty colleagues, how much would you have to get paid to give up your tenure, first of all, and then to be followed by a media crew with a camera and a microphone every step of every day and be scrutinized for every decision you make on every class lecture, every grading assignment that you turn in, and to be held to those standards, and to also know that any given day when you show up for work could be your last day with that employer, and you'll have to pack up all of your possessions and move your family to the next best job you can find. How much would you have to get paid? And they look at me sideways and say, a whole lot more than I'm currently making.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so I said, okay, so you've got two choices. You can tolerate the coaching marketplace and the salaries that come with it, or you can give them tenure. Which do you prefer? And they usually come back. They say, well, tenure's for the faculty.
That's our thing.
Okay. So come at me with a better argument. I don't necessarily love multi-million-dollar salaries, but I understand them a lot better now than I did 10 years ago when I started doing this work.
Yeah, which is interesting.
It's part of the landscape. All we can do is hope to hire good people who are good stewards of the resources and take care of the university brand. And sometimes we're really successful with that, and sometimes we're not.
Yeah, exactly. I like your perspective on that, the tenure and the not tenure, and especially the evaluation point. Coaches are evaluating every move they make, which I think is very important. It kind of leads me to the primary reason for having you on is your work with the 1A FAR Association. The FAR community has always put the student athlete well-being as its top priority, right? For the 1A FAR Association, for the faculty athletics reps, the history of the position, which was why the position was created initially, from my understanding. So I wonder about the general feeling amongst the Division I FARs in terms of the current state of college athletics. And I understand now that you're on a Division I council, you got to be careful in what you say. But you are an FAR and you are president-elect of the 1A FAR, so you can give us some perspective on that.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is that faculty athletics representatives are an incredibly diverse group of individuals, and so I will not pretend to speak for all of them. And that's one thing I learned really well during my service on the NCAA Constitution Committee last year, especially when we get into the Division II and III perspective, when we have all divisions at the table. There's a diversity of perspectives on this. At our core, this position is intended to protect and maintain the centerpiece of academics within college athletics. And I think most of us would say to advocate for the interests of our students at all times. And our students know this. They know us on campus. They know that we're an impartial advocate, to use that word. It's a role that I like to play here on campus for them outside of the athletics program. So they know they can come to us at any time with issues, and we will do our best to take care of those issues and protect the university and protect the students at the same time. It's really interesting now because so much of the movement in college athletics is student-centered. We're in the business of expanding opportunities, liberalizing rules, making pathways that weren't available to student athletes simply because they were athletes. And we're finding out with a variety of judicial movements and legal cases and litigation that some of those restrictions were untenable, not sustainable. So what are we going to do about it? We are very carefully trying to walk a fine line between advocating fiercely for our student athletes and making sure that we don't go so far as to completely destroy the college athletics model. The idea that students on our campuses like to compete in sports, it's fundamental. And the idea that goes away is something none of us really want to ever even think about. But we can only go so far with the liberalizing for things like name, image, and likeness, and transfer rules, and academic eligibility requirements, and enforcement and compliance, all of these things that we're fundamentally reevaluating in real time right now. On the surface, we want to do the right thing for the student athletes, but if we really just open the doors and liberalize everything, we no longer have intercollegiate athletics. We're back to those days right before the NCAA was even created, when college athletics were really morphing into what felt like professional sports that just happened to take place on our campuses. And that's where I think the faculty athletics representatives have a particularly important seat at the table to kind of bring the sides together, bring the arguments to the table, and negotiate an agreement that protects institutions, protects the academic enterprise, emphasizes the importance of academics for student athletes, protects the interests of the student athletes, at the same time as placing meaningful guardrails and boundaries in place so that we don't evolve into a semi-pro or professional sports enterprise that just happens to take place on our campuses. I don't think anybody really wants that. There might be a few donors and outside interests who would love to see effectively pro sports or semi-pro sports on those campuses, but I'm going to continue to fly the University of Tennessee flag and say we represent the institutions here, and the institution has a lot more at stake than making some dollars off our students on the playing field. We've got to remember our central enterprise here is to educate our students and develop human capital.
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that. I think some of the things you touched on are actually excellent, right? When you talk about the faculty athletics rep, because there are, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, there are faculty around the country who don't necessarily see the value of athletics to the academic mission of a university. And you sitting in a room when you're meeting with other faculty for whatever the topic of discussion is, you bring this perspective of identifying why athletics is important. And I imagine every FAR, that's probably something they can agree on, is that this is an important aspect of the academic mission across the university. I wonder if you can touch on that just a little bit. I mean, I don't want you to talk on any squabbles you've had with the history professor or anything like that, but just touch on that part of your role.
As I've gotten more into college athletics over the last 10 years, I have really come to appreciate how important it is to our academic enterprise. And in fact, I should say, when Chancellor Jimmy Cheek, former Chancellor of the University of Tennessee, appointed me to this role in 2012, he was very clear to write my job description as a two-way street, protecting academics within the athletics enterprise and protecting athletics within the academic enterprise.
Interesting.
And it really struck me, and I don't think that's necessarily common across the Division I landscape. I think it's maybe foundational and fundamental, but it's not actually written down in black and white. And so I've taken that very seriously. So when I go through the athletics program with visitors or honorary coaches for our football program, for example, if they're members of the faculty or administration, I make sure they see all of the non-athlete students who are engaged with that enterprise. And the best example I can give you is our media and broadcasting facilities. We have essentially a professional grade broadcasting facility in our athletics enterprise by function of being the University of Tennessee and also being a member of the Southeastern Conference and having the SEC network. We have on-campus ability to produce, deliver broadcast events in real time all over our campus facilities without another network having to come here with duplicated material. But more importantly, we have an entire army of undergraduate and graduate students staffing that and learning how to do this. And my understanding is that all of them get jobs in the industry after they graduate from the University of Tennessee. That doesn't happen without the athletics program on this campus. And it's not just broadcasting, it's sports medicine, it's wellness, it's kinesiology, it's business analytics. We've got students working with the athletics program in so many different ways all over this campus whose lives are being affected and changed by their involvement with UT athletics. It goes well beyond our 500 student athletes. We probably have 200 or 300 graduates affiliated with in some way our athletics program for every one student athlete we have. We have students at the doctoral level writing dissertations about our athletics program. This is American culture. It's higher education playing out in real time. If we don't use that laboratory to learn something, we're leaving money on the table in some sense. We're failing in our most basic mission. It's not unlike having a world-class telescope on campus and keeping it only for this class or that class. If we don't make it available more broadly, we're not fulfilling our true mission as a land-grant university, certainly for the University of Tennessee. So it's incredibly important as a component of our academic program. And I would take that to the next level as well with name, image, and likeness. I've been very proud of the fact that rather than sit back and let this all happen, my university and several others like us have actually put academic programs in place to make sure that our student athletes and our non-athlete students are educated about what it takes to run a business, to market your own name, image, or likeness, and do it in a way that's compliant with federal and state laws. You're going to have to pay taxes on that income. Let's show you how to do that. You might need a business plan. You might need some marketing expertise. You might need to understand the legal landscape to know what you're protected against and what you're not protected against. Those are basic training components that would not be part of a traditional academic major anywhere on our campus, but now we're developing that academic content to deliver to our students. That would not happen on this campus if it weren't for athletics.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. You think about name, image, and likeness. The key point benefit you're saying is, while sometimes in athletics, I know when I was playing 20-something years ago, the ability to go off and do an internship and get the experience of making money and running a business or whatever it is was hard to find, right? Because you just didn't have time. This was pre NCAA rules on how long you could practice and stuff like that. But these athletes now, if they have the opportunity to participate in NIL, I mean, they come out with a resume that says, yes, I was an athlete, I was a student, I got this types of grade, but also I ran an enterprise, right, where I was able to bring in this much revenue and capitalize on this and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And hopefully that helps as I go join an organization or go off and become an entrepreneur. I think that's an excellent way that you put it. The diverse experiences of students and students who aren't athletes on your campus is also an excellent thing. I wonder if you can repeat again what the president told you that your charge was as the FAR when you first started. I thought that was an excellent statement.
Yeah, it was very clear to preserve the importance of academics within the athletics enterprise and to preserve the importance of athletics within the academic enterprise.
Yeah, I think that's excellent right there. I'll ask this final question here and then we'll wrap. Do you believe that the voice of the faculty athletics representative is being heard in the national discussion about the student athlete experience where we are now and evolving to in the future?
Well, I'll be biased in my response. I certainly believe the voice is being heard because I'm at the table personally for a lot of these meetings.
I guess you really couldn't answer that any other way, could you?
That's right. And but at the same time, I've been serving on the Division I nominating committee for the last couple of years. And so I'm involved with the appointments to all the governance committees in the NCAA Division I structure. I've been at the table for the name, image, and likeness working groups from day one. Was part of the Constitution Committee, and not just me, but I'm in the room with other faculty athletics representatives as well. And it frustrated me, I'll be honest, it frustrated me early on in my term as FAR that the message was we should be on the committees, we should be appointed to these boards, we should have a seat at the table. And we were very vocal about wanting to be included in governance as FARs. And my message to my colleagues as FARs is you don't tell somebody you belong at the table, you show them you belong at the table. You do your homework, you study the issues, you engage with student athletes so that when you show up, they want more. Make them want you. You want to be wanted, be wantable. You want to be loved, Be lovable. Don't just tell them to include us. And so I've been very impressed, and I'm not just trying to toot my own horn here. There are lots of people, and I'll shout out my good friend Kurt Zorn, who carried this banner for so many years as the faculty athletics representative at Indiana University. He was a fantastic example of somebody who took this seriously and represented FARs really well on the national stage. There are so many other examples I could name. But we've got folks now on the Division I Transformation Committee representing FARs. We've got folks at just about every level with Division I Council on down through the ranks of the committees. There's a seat at the table for a faculty athletics representative everywhere we'd like to have one. And my sense is those seats are being used very effectively. And I always encourage the rank and file faculty athletics representatives out there to work through us to have their voice be heard. We can be very effective. I will say also that 1AFAR, which split off from the Faculty Athletics Representatives Association many years ago, is working very closely now with FARA, the Faculty Athletics Representatives Association that includes all divisions in the NCAA. We're actually planning a combined meeting for this November. So we understand it's important to be a unified voice. Even though we're a very diverse group with lots of opinions and lots of different opinions about all these big issues that are facing us today, we recognize the moment here and are working carefully to coordinate our conversations and to make sure we never fail in our efforts to represent student athletes and to preserve academics as part of the enterprise here, the athletics enterprise going forward. It's a position of honor, and I take it very seriously, and I know my colleagues do as well. So I look forward to seeing where things go. It'll be an interesting year or 2 or 3 or 10 here in intercollegiate athletics, but lots of opportunities for sure.
All right, yeah, opportunities are great. Evolution is great. And the fact that academics is continually being emphasized within the direction that we go in college athletics is also a wonderful thing. Dr. Bruce, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's been very fun to chat with you. Look forward to seeing you down the road.
Yes, sir. That was Dr. Don Bruce. He is an economic professor at University of Tennessee. He's also the director of the Boyd Center for Business and Economics Research. He's the faculty athletics representative and president-elect of the 1A FAR Association and was recently appointed to the Division I Council. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.